Garrett Langston's fingers tapped restlessly on the steering wheel of the rented Honda Civic, a far cry from the sleek Tesla Model S that usually graced his driveway. The car's bland beige interior smelled faintly of pine-scented air freshener, deliberately unremarkable, forgettable. Just like everything else about his disguise. Nothing about him today, whispered CEO. No one looking at the man in the frayed Detroit Tigers cap and faded work boots would ever suspect he was the visionary behind Quick Bite, the fifth largest fast food chain in the nation. He adjusted the fake beard glued tightly to his jaw, wincing as it tugged at his skin. The thick framed glasses, non-prescription, slid down his nose again, and he pushed them back up with a quiet sigh. This wasn't just dress-up, it was war paint. Garrett studied his reflection in the rearview mirror. The uniform, the name tag reading Gary, generic, simple, invisible, made him feel like a ghost haunting the shell of what used to be his dream. He wasn't just here to observe, he was here to mourn, or maybe to resurrect. This wasn't his first time going undercover. Years ago, when Quick Bite was still a fragile idea, kept alive on caffeine and ambition, he had visited stores in disguise to understand what customers saw and employees endured. It had always worked, but this time felt heavier. This location, on Detroit's once bustling Woodward Avenue, was one of his originals, his first real risk. The place where he signed that terrifying business loan 26 years ago. Back then, it had been a symbol of hope. Now it was hemorrhaging money and soul. The numbers were undeniable. Customer satisfaction down 18%, staff turnover scraping 87%, and revenue sliding year over year. The regional manager had already whispered the word closure, but Garrett needed to see it fall apart with his own eyes before letting it go. He started the engine, the Civic humming to life with none of the elegance of his Tesla. But today, luxury didn't belong. The lunch rush would soon begin. If there was ever a moment to test the pressure points of his once beloved franchise, it was now. As he approached the restaurant, the Quick Bite logo on the building looked worn, almost embarrassed to still be standing. Trash bins overflowed near the entrance. A couple argued loudly by the door. An elderly man struggled alone with the heavy glass. Garrett made mental notes as he watched, parked far from the entrance. He whispered into his phone recorder. Signage faded, no staff at entrance, poor maintenance. Every detail was a symptom, and he was diagnosing a sickness in his own creation. The drive-through line was slow, agonizingly so. The car ahead of him waited 7 full minutes to reach the speaker. When his turn came, a young voice greeted him through the static. Protocol followed. Barely. Hi, can I get a number 2 combo with a Diet Coke? He asked, using a slightly higher tone than normal. No upsell, another crack in the system. As he inched forward, Garrett noticed a teenage employee in uniform slouched by the dumpsters, glued to his phone. Policy dictated parking lot cleaning during breaks, not passive scrolling. But no one seemed to care. No one was watching, and no one was leading. When he finally reached the window, the girl who handed him his drink, her name tag read Shanice, avoided his eyes. Her ponytail sagged, her shirt bore a faint grease stain. No smile, no acknowledgement, just the transaction. Garrett watched her shut the window with mechanical precision, like closing a door on purpose. From the driver's seat, he scanned the kitchen. It moved like a theater with no director. Cooks shuffling without urgency. A manager lost behind a screen. Food sat in warmers too long. The magic, if it had ever lived here, was gone. Then came the only flicker of light. A young man named Jamal handed him his bag with a thin, tired smile. Garrett struck up a brief conversation, casual, curious. How long you been here? About 8 months, Jamal answered, lowering his voice. It's a job, you know. Some good people here, though. The words clung to Garrett like dew on dry land. Some good people here. Maybe, just maybe, there was something worth saving. He parked nearby, recording notes as he sifted through the contents of the bag. No seal sticker, no visible napkins, the receipt tossed carelessly inside. A small failure, but one of dozens. The food itself wasn't awful. The burger was assembled correctly, just lukewarm. The fries? Fresh but barely salted. It was mediocrity with a shrug, and that was the real danger. Not a bad product, an uninspired one. He drove to Roosevelt Park, needing space to think, to process. Children laughed on a nearby playground. Office workers picnicked in the sun. There was life here, joy. The contrast between the park and the sterile gloom of the restaurant stung him. He placed the food on his lap and reached in to inspect it further, when his fingers brushed something foreign, flat, rectangular, tucked beneath the napkins. He pulled out a white envelope, unsealed and unmarked. Curiosity surged through him. Inside, a small collection of ones and fives, some quarters and dimes. Folded next to them was a quick bite order slip with a shaky note written in pen. Donnell's kidney surgery, $427.00 so far. Don't tell management. The world fell still. Garrett stared at the note, then the envelope, then the food, now forgotten. The absurdity of it all hit him like a punch. Nearly $500.00, scraped together from loose change and minimum wage paychecks, hidden in a fast food bag. Not for theft, not for profit, for survival. He checked the receipt again, timestamp, register number. This wasn't an accident, it was deliberate, and that changed everything. The car engine roared to life again. Garrett didn't hesitate. He ripped off the fake beard, threw it on the passenger seat, along with the hat and glasses. The disguise had served its purpose. He was no longer Gary the delivery driver. He was Garrett Langston, CEO of Quick Bite. And someone in that kitchen was about to tell him the truth. As he made a sharp U-turn back toward the restaurant, the envelope sat beside him once more, its contents now neatly placed back inside. But in his mind, the bills weren't just currency. They were sacrifices. They were belief. Proof that amid a broken system, people still tried to care, still tried to help each other. $427.00. Less than the bottle of wine he'd had with dinner the night before. And yet, it weighed more than anything he'd carried in years. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where we believe that the human spirit is never truly defeated, only waiting to rise. The name Darnell echoed in Garrett's mind like a quiet drumbeat that wouldn't stop. He didn't know what this man looked like yet, dishwasher, line cook, janitor. But someone at this location had inspired their co-workers to do something extraordinary, to risk their jobs for him. And they had done it in silence, in secret, not for glory or recognition, but because they couldn't watch someone suffer without trying to help. That alone said more about the culture at this location than any quarterly report ever could. Traffic crawled on the way back to the restaurant, but Garrett welcomed the delay. It gave him space to think, to sort through the tangled emotions now taking root in his chest. Anger, confusion, compassion. Technically, they had violated policy. The corporate handbook was clear. Unauthorized solicitation of funds on company property was grounds for disciplinary action. But this wasn't about rules anymore. This was about people. When he pulled into the parking lot, he spotted a sleek luxury SUV glinting in the sun. The license plate confirmed it. Blake Thompson, the regional manager, the man who was supposed to be guiding this struggling store back towards stability. His car looked freshly washed, tone deaf given the city's ongoing water restrictions and the crumbling state of the restaurant he oversaw. That minor detail struck Garrett harder than he expected. It told him everything. Garrett parked beside it and stepped out, no longer hunched in disguise. No more delivery driver named Gary. He stood straight, every inch the founder and face of QuickBite, carrying the weight of leadership and something heavier: responsibility. As he entered the building, several customers did double takes. A child pointed. A teenager whispered to her friend, "Isn't that the QuickBite guy?" He ignored them. The young cashier at the counter faltered mid-greeting as her eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Langston? Where's your manager?" he asked, his voice calm but iron beneath the surface. "In the office," she stammered, pointing toward the back hallway. Garrett found Blake Thompson reclined in his chair, feet on the desk, laughing into his phone about an upcoming golf trip. The moment he looked up and saw Garrett standing in the doorway, the blood drained from his face. "God, I'll call you back," Blake muttered, bolting upright. "Mr. Langston, what a surprise. If I'd known you were coming." "I need the break room cleared for the next hour," Garrett interrupted coldly, "and I need every kitchen staff member from this shift in there, now." Blake hesitated. "Sir, it's peak lunch hour. This location is operating at 40% efficiency. I think we can spare them." 10 minutes later, 7 staff members sat in a tense circle around the scratched laminate table in the back room. Garrett recognized Jamal from the drive-thru, and the others looked equally uneasy. All of them bore the subtle marks of long hours and low morale. Tired shoulders, cautious eyes. Blake hovered by the door, arms folded. The shift manager, Tasha, wrung her hands. Garrett placed the envelope on the table like a loaded question. "Who's Darnell?" he asked, softly. The silence was thick. Every glance, every breath seemed to hesitate. Finally, Blake took a step forward, clearing his throat. "Sir, if there's been some sort of unauthorized fundraising—" "Not now, Blake," Garrett snapped without looking at him. He studied the room, not as a CEO, but as a man trying to understand the soul of what he'd built. "I'm not here for policy violations. I want to know who Darnell is, and why you're risking your jobs to hide money for his son's kidney surgery." A quiet voice emerged from the back. "He's not here today." A young woman, early 20s, curls tucked neatly into a bun, met Garrett's gaze. Her name tag read, Evie. "And you are?" he asked. "Evie Coleman. I work grill." "Tell me about Darnell, Evie." She looked around, unsure if she should, but then her spine straightened with quiet conviction. "Darnell Johnson. He's our dishwasher. Been here 5 years. He's the kind of person who never asks for anything. Works harder than all of us. His son Marcus is 9, has stage 4 kidney disease." Her voice cracked. "The insurance won't cover the treatment he needs. It's experimental, but it's his best chance." Garrett didn't interrupt. He simply listened as the story unfolded. Carlos, a weathered man with silver-streaked hair, spoke next. "I've been cooking here since before you bought this place. Darnell doesn't talk about his problems. He just shows up and does the work, even when it breaks him." Blake interjected, irritation creeping into his voice. "With all due respect, personal problems shouldn't interfere with workplace efficiency. These distractions are part of why this location is—" Garrett turned on him. "Does Darnell leave his problems at home when he shows up for every shift? Does he clock out of his pain just because it's not profitable?" Silence. He looked back at the staff. "Tell me about the envelope." Jamal swallowed hard. "It was my idea. Darnell's too proud to ask for help, so we just started pooling tips, lunch money, spare change. We needed somewhere safe, so we used the bags. Only for regulars we trust. Why not tell management?" A bitter laugh rippled through the room. Carlos answered flatly. "Last time someone needed help, Shanice asked for emergency time off when her mom had a stroke. Blake wrote her up for failing to provide adequate scheduling notice. We learned our lesson." Garrett's jaw clenched. Evie nodded solemnly. That envelope. It was meant for Mrs. Winters. Comes every Tuesday. Always gives extra. Jamal must have mixed up the order. Jamal looked down, ashamed. It was my first time helping. Garrett nodded slowly, the pieces forming a painful picture in his mind, not just of a location that had lost its spark, but of a team that had been forced to hide their humanity in order to survive. "How much does Darnell need?" he asked quietly. He blinked, surprised. 15,000 just for the consultation and testing. Another 50,000 if Marcus qualifies for the trial. Garrett said nothing for a moment. Then he reached into his wallet and placed 5 crisp $100 0-cent bills into the envelope. "I want to know everything about Darnell and his son," he said. "Tell me the full story." And they did. Evie spoke of a father who worked 2 jobs, dishwasher by day, office cleaner by night, a man who survived on 4 hours of sleep but never missed his son's appointments, of Marcus, who loved science experiments and baseball, but now spent most of his time indoors, too sick to play. Carlos added that Darnell had collapsed last month, dehydration and exhaustion, came back the next day apologizing like he'd let them down. He'd sold his car, moved into a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, given up everything that could be given. Garrett's throat tightened. Then the break room door creaked open. A thin man in a soiled apron stood frozen in the doorway, his face a mask of confusion and fatigue. Darnell Johnson. He looked no older than 30 but carried the weight of someone twice that. His uniform hung off his frame. Dark circles painted his eyes. "You needed me too?" he asked. Then, seeing Garrett, "Mr. Langston, what's happening?" Garrett stood, offering a hand. "Mr. Johnson, please join us." Darnell stepped inside slowly. His eyes locked on the envelope. Then, panic. "If this is about taking extra meal breaks sometimes, I can explain." "It's not," Garrett said gently. "Please, sit." Eve pulled out a chair. Darnell sank into it like a man who didn't know how much longer he could stand. He had pushed the envelope toward him. "Your co-workers have been collecting this. For Marcus." Darnell's face shifted through a dozen emotions at once. Shock, confusion, fear, gratitude. "You've been..." "What?" "We know about the treatment," Jamal said. "Mrs. Winters told us about a program. She's been helping." "I never told anyone." Evie looked down. "I overheard you on the phone. You were crying in your car after your shift." The room went quiet again. "There's $927 0 here now," Garrett said softly. "Not enough, but a start." Darnell's hand hovered over the envelope, then pulled away, shame flickering in his eyes. "And if you haven't already, subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where we believe that the human spirit is never truly defeated, only waiting to rise." "I can't take this," Darnell whispered, pushing the envelope back across the table as if it were something dangerous. "It's against company policy. If I lose this job, Marcus loses his insurance. As limited as it is, it's all we have." His voice trembled with a blend of fear and dignity, the desperation of a man trying to hold on to the only lifeline left for his son. Blake Thompson, sensing an opportunity to reclaim control, stepped forward, voice clipped and officious. "He's right. QuickBite explicitly prohibits this kind of unauthorized fundraising. There are procedures for a reason." Garrett didn't even turn to face him. "When was the last time you visited this location before today, Blake?" The regional manager faltered, caught off guard. "I've been overseeing multiple, reviewing reports." 3 months, Carlos supplied quietly. "And that was just to yell at Tasha about drive-through times." Garrett nodded slowly. It all fit too perfectly. The indifference, the neglect, the culture of fear. It was all seeded and grown under absentee leadership. He turned back to Darnell. "Tell me about Marcus's options, no filters." And so, with trembling hands folded in his lap and eyes glassy from fatigue and memory. Darnell opened up. For the next 10 minutes he laid out every heartbreaking detail: the failing kidneys, the relentless dialysis, the toll on a 9-year-old's fragile body. He spoke of hope, once bright, now shrinking, the regenerative therapy that offered a real chance, but came with a price tag they couldn't touch. The specialist at Detroit Children's says he's a good candidate, but we're running out of time. If we don't act in the next few months. His voice cracked. The rest didn't need to be said. Garrett stood, breath sharp. His hands moved with purpose, sliding off his suit jacket and rolling up his sleeves, a signature gesture his executive team knew all too well. "Blake," he said, his voice hardening into something cold and absolute. "You're on administrative leave. Effective immediately." Blake blinked, stunned. "What?" "Tasha," Garrett continued, now turning to the stunned shift manager, "you're in charge here until further notice." Before anyone could fully react, Garrett addressed the room. "I'm calling an emergency meeting with my executive team in 1 hour, and Darnell, I want you there." Darnell looked overwhelmed, as if he hadn't fully processed what was happening. "Sir, I don't understand." "We're going to fix this," Garrett replied. "Not just for Marcus, for everyone." His tone had shifted. It carried the steel of a man who'd built an empire, but now, for the first time in years, that steel had a fire behind it. He wasn't just protecting a brand, he was honoring a promise. "Evie, I want you in the meeting too. Carlos, you as well. Anyone who contributed to that envelope." Blake's face flushed with outrage. "You can't be serious. These people broke policy. They should be disciplined, not rewarded." Eric turned, slowly, stepping toward him until they were nearly eye to eye. His voice dropped, heavy with the weight of a story he'd carried in silence. "My younger brother Michael died when I was 19. Kidney failure. We had a chance, an experimental treatment, but insurance wouldn't cover it. We didn't have the money." The room went still. "I worked 3 jobs trying to help. I watched him waste away. Helpless. If someone had done for us what these people are doing for Darnell." Garrett paused, his voice catching. "I might still have my brother." No one spoke. The revelation was a blow none of them had seen coming. In 26 years of company history, Garrett had never told that story, not in interviews, not even in board meetings. "No, Blake, I won't be punishing them. But you and I, we'll be having a serious conversation later." Garrett's eyes swept the room. "Right now, I have bigger things to do." He turned to the rest of the team, who now saw him not just as a CEO, but as a man. One who'd known loss, who'd lived the struggle they were drowning in. "I need the dining room cleared in 30 minutes. We're hosting a video conference. We have a child to save and a company culture to rebuild." The room burst into motion. Staff scattered, rearranging tables, handing out free meal vouchers to customers turned away. In a matter of minutes, the restaurant had transformed from a place of resignation to a place of purpose. Darnell sat still, eyes locked on the envelope. "Why?" he asked softly when the others had gone. "Why are you doing this for us?" Garrett placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Because 26 years ago I made a promise to my brother. If I ever had the power to stop another family from going through what we did, I would use it. Today, I finally can." The dining area had become something sacred. Chairs arranged in a semicircle. The largest wall now bore the Quick Bite logo through a mounted projector. Confused customers lingered at the windows, watching. But inside, a storm of change was about to begin. Across the room, Garrett was on the phone with the CFO, voice low but urgent. Darnell sat hunched, overwhelmed. Evie stayed beside him, occasionally resting a hand on his shoulder in silent support. "They're ready," Carlos said, adjusting the webcam and stepping back. The screen came alive with the faces of startled executives. Garrett hadn't given them enough time to build their usual walls. That was the point. He stepped into frame. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, standing tall before the camera. "Today I discovered something at our Woodward Avenue location that requires immediate attention and represents both a failure and an opportunity." And then, for the next 20 minutes, he dismantled the wall between leadership and the front lines. He told them everything: the poor management, the broken morale, the envelope, and finally, the truth of his own story, the loss that started it all. He held up a photo. A boy, his brother, grinning despite the tubes and hospital room behind them. Garrett as a teen, holding him close. "I built QuickBite because of this," he said. "Because of him. I told myself I was building a business, but what I was really building was a promise." Silence. Patricia Winters, longtime HR director, broke it. "What are you proposing?" "Complete overhaul of employee support," Garrett said, "starting with a permanent medical emergency fund for situations just like Darnell's. But first we have an immediate need." He called Darnell forward. With trembling steps, Darnell addressed the executives. "My son, Marcus. He's 9. He needs treatment that insurance won't cover. Without it, he'll need a transplant. Soon. And there's no guarantee we'll find a match." The CFO looked uneasy. "While this is clearly emotional, we can't." "We can and we will," Garrett interrupted. "I'm matching the envelope 10-1 from the company's fund. That's $10,000, 0 cents. And I'm authorizing a $65,000, 0 cents advance immediately." Outrage and confusion rippled through the executive team. Garrett raised his hand. "This isn't charity, it's culture. For years, we've claimed to care about our people. If those are just words, tear them off the walls. But if we mean it, it starts here." Patricia leaned forward. "We'll need structure." "Exactly," Garrett said. "That's why I'm establishing the Darnell Fund, effective immediately." He laid out the plan: seed funding, regular contributions from profits, a team of employees who understood real hardship, a streamlined approval process that didn't require begging for compassion. The resistance began to soften, they could see it. Reduced turnover, increased loyalty, a brand that meant something. The call ended. Garrett turned. Darnell stood there, eyes glistening. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. Aaron shook his head. "You already did," he whispered, "by showing up. Every day. For your son." He looked out across the now quiet restaurant. This was only the beginning. "Don't thank me yet," Garrett said gently, placing a hand on Darnell's shoulder. "Thank me when Marcus is back on that field, running bases, playing baseball again." Darnell nodded slowly. Then, after a pause, he looked Garrett in the eye. "Your brother, would he be proud of this?" It was the first time that day Garrett smiled without hesitation. An unguarded, full-hearted smile that softened every edge of his usually steely presence. "Yes," he said, voice low with certainty. "I think he finally would be." The next 2 weeks unfolded like a storm and a sunrise colliding, fast, bright, and full of purpose. The Woodward Avenue restaurant, once neglected and failing, remained open but ran on a reduced team. Garrett had insisted the majority of the staff shift focus, not on flipping burgers but on shaping something bigger. The break room transformed into a makeshift command center. Its walls now bore colorful flowcharts, sticky notes of policy ideas, and dozens of handwritten employee stories submitted from QuickBite locations across the country. In the heart of this transformation, Evie emerged. No longer the shy grill worker, but a confident leader, bridging the voices of frontline employees with corporate decision-makers. Garrett walked into the room one morning to find her and Carlos deep in discussion with Patricia Winters, flown in from headquarters. They were huddled over a hand-drawn diagram that proposed a tiered support system. "We need clear eligibility," Patricia said, pointing to the top of the chart. "But it can't be so rigid that we punish people for falling between the cracks." "What if we design a two-track process?" Evie suggested. "Fast track for critical care, full review for long-term support." Garrett stood in the doorway, silently observing with quiet pride. These weren't just employees anymore. They were architects of a movement. Given responsibility, they had bloomed with the fierce brilliance of people who finally felt seen. "They could work," Patricia said. "Garrett?" He stepped forward, eyes gleaming. "I think what we're seeing here is the rebirth of our company culture. One conversation at a time." He placed a folder on the table. "And I have news." The room hushed as he opened it. "The board voted yesterday. The Darnell Fund has been officially approved, with an initial investment of $5 million. Going forward, 1% of our annual net profits will be added every year." The cheers were instant and overwhelming. Patricia's eyes widened. "That's significantly more than what we proposed." "I made a compelling case," Garrett said with a knowing smirk. He wasn't done. "Also, I restructured the regional management team. Blake won't be returning." Carlos exhaled deeply, grinning. "Best thing I've heard all year." "But this isn't just about replacing bad leadership. It's about promoting the right kind." He turned to Tasha, who had quietly been organizing documents in the corner. "I'm creating a new role, Director of Employee Advocacy for this region. Tasha, the job is yours if you'll take it." Tasha looked up, stunned. "Me? But I'm just a shift manager." "Not anymore," Garrett interrupted. "You saw what was happening and chose not to interfere. That's not failure, it's awareness. And awareness is the first step to transformation." The energy in the room was palpable now, electric with possibility. And Garrett had one final reveal. "It's not just about policies, it's about identity." He turned his tablet and played a video, a polished announcement about the Darnell Fund, featuring employees from across the company sharing their stories, struggles, and dreams. "This goes live tomorrow," Garrett said, "on every platform. This isn't internal policy, this is a public recommitment to our founding values." Evie hesitated. "Isn't that a little self-congratulatory? Using Darnell's story for PR?" Garrett nodded, respecting her candor. "It would be. Except for two reasons. One, Darnell and Marcus approved every frame. And two..." The door opened, cutting him off. Darnell stepped in, not in his usual grease-stained apron, but in a crisp white shirt and tie. His posture had changed. His presence had changed. The tired dishwasher had become something else entirely. "Sorry I'm late," he said, smiling wide. Marcus had a follow-up. His test results came back even better than expected. The room exploded with applause and laughter. As the commotion settled, Garrett pulled Evie aside and spoke quietly. "The second reason," he said, "is that Darnell insisted on telling his story publicly. But there's more." Garrett nodded to Darnell. Darnell stepped forward and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small business card. His hand trembled as he held it up. "As of this morning," he said, voice thick with emotion, "I'm no longer a dishwasher. Mr. Langston has appointed me the first official administrator of the Darnell Fund. I'll be working directly with employees across the company who are going through what I did." There was stunned silence, then a wave of cheers. Carlos clapped him on the back. "But who's gonna wash the dishes now?" Garrett laughed. "We had 12 applications within hours of posting the job. Starting wages are up 22%. Health benefits improved." Patricia blinked in disbelief. "The board approved all this?" "They didn't just approve it," Garrett said. "They're expanding it." He showed another tablet, this one displaying updated performance metrics from Woodward Avenue. In just 2 weeks, employee call-outs down 67%. Customer satisfaction up 12%. Operational efficiency up even with fewer staff. Turns out, Garrett said, when you invest in people, the numbers take care of themselves. Then, his voice softened. There's one more thing. The room fell still again. The treatment Marcus is receiving, it's funded by the Langston Foundation, a nonprofit I created in my brother's name. The Darnell Fund is only the beginning. He looked around at his team, his family. We're going to help a lot of families, starting with Darnell's. But it won't end there. 3 months later, Garrett stood in the polished lobby of Detroit Children's Hospital, holding a balloon bouquet in one hand and a small baseball glove in the other. The elevator chimed. He stepped inside and pressed the button for the pediatric floor. The hospital had become a second home, but this visit felt different. Room 412 was filled with laughter. Garrett paused outside the door, smiling at the sound before knocking. "Mr. Langston," Marcus called from the bed, his voice strong, filled with life. The boy's cheeks had color again, his eyes sparkled. Darnell rose to greet Garrett in a tailored suit that now fit him like confidence. "The therapy's working," Darnell said, barely containing his joy. "His kidney function is up to 62%. We're going home tomorrow." Garrett placed the glove in Marcus's hands. "Thought you might need this again." Then came a knock. A nurse poked her head in. "Mr. Johnson, there's a news crew downstairs asking for you and Mr. Langston. Something about a viral video." 20 minutes later, in the hospital cafeteria, they watched it together. A customer had filmed themselves opening a Quick Buy bag and finding a Darnell Fund card. What went viral, though, was the footage of Evie, Carlos, and others proudly explaining the program, wearing founder pins. Their sincerity struck a chord. Millions of views. Tens of thousands of comments, people asking how to help. Garrett's phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Traffic up 37%. Applications up 215%. Board wants to meet. Also check the stock. Gareth checked. Quick Bite shares had jumped 12% in one morning. "This wasn't the plan," Darnell said quietly. "I never wanted to be the face of anything." Gareth nodded. "It's not about being the face. It's about being the heart. People are starving for proof that companies can have a soul." Just then, a nurse approached. "Are you the Darnell from the fund? My sister works for Quick Bite in Phoenix. Her application for our mom's surgery just got approved." Without hesitation, Darnell hugged her. That night, back at the Woodward Avenue restaurant, Garrett walked through a space transformed, not just physically, but spiritually. The walls were brighter, the staff energized, the air charged with purpose. Above the kitchen door, a framed envelope now hung. The envelope that started it all. A plaque beneath it read, "The Darnell Fund, because people matter more than profits." Tasha greeted him with updates. Evie, now in her manager's uniform, handed him a letter addressed in a child's handwriting. Inside, a drawing of a baseball player and a note. "Dear Mr. Langston, thank you for helping my dad and me. When I grow up, I want to help people too. Maybe I can work for you someday. Your friend, Marcus Johnson." Attached was a photo, Marcus in his hospital bed, beaming, holding the glove Garrett had given him. Garrett closed the envelope carefully. "Have this framed," he said. "One copy for my office here, one for headquarters." Evie smiled. "You're splitting time now?" Garrett nodded. "Some things are too important to delegate." As he looked around, at the employees, at the donation box by the register filling with quiet generosity, Garrett felt something he hadn't in decades. Peace. The kind that only comes when a promise is finally fulfilled.